heat is still on.
Massive game.
New Zealand to win.
Great kick.
It's been a terrible year for the Wallabies.
You're missing an injection of life.
Stupid guys think they're so good.
Hello and welcome to RuggaMatrix International, episode 247. I'm your host, Juro Sen. Let's go to Ben Kimber's strike issue of the week.
Strike issue of the week, my friend. As always, we like to go off the top with what's keeping us talking. Now, I was considering going with the Wallabies squad. Quade Cooper, not in there.
Yeah.
But look, we're going to park that towards a bit further down in the show. I do want to get into that squad and some of the checker watch as well. But for me, really, let's focus on Super Rugby. It is where all the action is for us at the moment. 4 good games, 4 interesting games, 4 games that were worth watching. But I think out of that, what I was left thinking was, can anyone stop the Crusaders? I mean, if you look at those games and the 4 teams that are coming into the semis, it doesn't look like anyone is in the kind of shape the Crusaders are. They got the few players back. They got conditions that were horrendous. But I tell you what, they look like the title team right now.
Yeah, it's a good point, and I'm glad you started off with that instead of the Australians, because that's where the rugby is at the moment. And you did say the Crusaders were the team to be the start of the year. They hit
I
a
did.
bit.
I did.
Yes, you
Thank
did.
you.
They hit a bit of a speed bump, Benny, though late in the series, and I meant really, really late. But that was just a minor thing, just a speed bump, right? That's all. But I will say that they played the right game for the conditions, and the conditions were absolutely dreadful. But for a forward pack, and I'll go back to what I said about Steve Hansen, who believes they don't get enough credit for what their forwards do in World Rugby. Yeah. And those forwards in the Canterbury side were supreme at the weekend. Congratulations. And if they don't win it, it will be a little bit of a travesty, because I think, as you've said, they've been the best team.
Yeah, I don't think it'll be a travesty. Look, if a team is the best team all year and then gets done in the finals, I usually have no problem with it, right? It's up to them to take the title.
I do have a problem if it's a freak refereeing decision and it's something that's taken out of their hands. So that's possible.
Potentially.
That's possible.
Potentially.
So that would make it a travesty.
All right. I'll give you that.
Did you remember the Lion series?
I did remember the Lion series. I think it wasn't that long ago. But what will be very, very interesting is how it plays out, whether they have to go to South Africa or not. So travel is the big key this weekend. The Canes travelling over to take on the Lions, the Chiefs travelling back to take on the Crusaders. The teams that are sitting ensconced at home, you'd have to think, are in good shape to do it. But before we get into the what's where in the semis, let's have a look at the games. And we'll get into the Crusaders game first, even though the Brumbies one was the first game of the weekend. Let's go Crusaders Highlanders first, because we were watching that one. As you mentioned, stunningly bad conditions. You know, thinking of all our New Zealand comrades over there who are waist deep in water.
Yeah, copping in the South Island.
Yeah, the South Island, unbelievable. Some talk they should have called the game off. The conditions were that bad. Deep puddles of water right across the ground, and it didn't look like a great place to be playing. It looked like this kind of grounds we played on as kids.
This is rugby, though.
It is rugby.
Yeah.
It is rugby. They got stuck in. Even Jack Goodhue, who had a big chuck before the game, that nervous vomit from a young bloke was really interesting to see.
You do it all the time before the show, don't you?
Before the show, that's right.
Just clean that up over there later. Yeah.
So look, it was a tough game, and I think a great game for the Crusaders. Those sorts of conditions suit them down to the ground. Not that they can't play in other conditions, but to play in such diabolically wet conditions where they get to grind it out. And look at their tries. 2 tries, both of which they were burrowing and barely touching it down on the line. So kudos to both teams' defence, but really the Crusaders to keep the opposition to nil in those conditions. And to keep it together, I thought that was a great effort, and it showed they are absolutely my favourites for the title still. What did you think of them, Bud?
Yeah, I mean, what I really liked about them was just their commitment to all aspects of the game. And kudos to both teams. They did try to move the ball when they had the opportunity, but the conditions were just so dreadful. I just like the way the game went for the Crusaders in terms of management. Good teams know how to manage the game. They know how to manage the game when it comes to conditions and the opposition. And I thought they managed the opposition well. And in the end, the Highlanders were desperate to try and put a point on the board, towards the last couple of moments to show they were really in the match. But it really wasn't a contest, Benny, that I thought the Highlanders were in. I mean, it really was all about the Crusaders, wasn't it? And I was really impressed. And it was good to see those players bounce back so hard after an arduous Lion series.
Yeah, I mean, and could you suggest that maybe that they could have made this tough for themselves by not playing a few of those players in the final round when the Canes got them, so they didn't get the absolutely guaranteed home final run, still a chance they could go to South Africa. So when you see those guys come back in, and Moody scored that first try, Crotty, of course, makes a big difference. That team, when they're full strength, look fantastic. Did they make a mistake in the final round?
Yeah, I'm a big believer that teams can err big time and I was there when the Waratahs did it. I was in the coach's box with Bob Dwyer when the Waratahs were trounced by the mighty Crusaders at the time because Bob Dwyer rested.
Trounced is a
almost
word.
rested the entire team to be prepared for the semi-finals. And we all know that the Brumbies...
The Lions did it last year, right? The Lions listed it.
The Lions and the Brumbies then trounced the Waratahs in the semi-finals of Super Rugby. I think the Kiwis can do it because of their depth, but the Australian teams can't do it. And Bernie Larkham will try to do it a little bit as well, and we'll get into that in a moment. But I think in some ways, given the program that the New Zealanders had, I'm not too critical of them, but generally as a rule, I think it's a bad way to go. And if there's any team, you can see, go back to 2011 when they didn't have a home ground, they had to play all over the world. If there's any team that can win away from home and do the arduous road trips, it's the Crusaders.
Well, look, some of our guys in comments will correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, if I'm right, that the first 3 titles the Crusaders won were all away from home. They basically made a habit of winning on the road, which particularly in Super Rugby, is a big call. It's not like playing within Australia in, say, Rugby League, where you just go up and down the coast and the eastern coast. You're travelling right around the world, so winning away from home in Super Rugby is a feat, which is why the Canes are going to be interesting this weekend.
Absolutely.
2 points out of that game I want to touch on. One was Liam Squire's hit on Mo'unga, and there's been a few Kiwi back rowers getting yellow cards lately, from Kano to Sam Kane, the other game we'll talk about, to Liam Squire. So they've got to be careful that control they're trying to get at the ruck and the hits they're trying to put on. I thought Liam Squire's yellow in the 5th minute was absolutely valid. I thought it looked malicious. Not malicious, maybe that's going to be hard, but it looked deliberate. He even followed through with the forearm, so I thought that was absolutely deserved. And it just looked silly, as opposed to some of these other ones that you talk about where you say, look, you can see he's trying to get a hit on, he didn't quite get there. I thought Squire, definitely a yellow. The other point I wanted to make, and if you've still got the game, guys, go and look at the 42nd minute if you didn't spot this. But, and you'll like this one.
Oh, yes. Yep.
The ball bounces forward off a Highlander, directly to another Highlander who grabs it, and the ref calls accidental offside and says it was totally reactionary. So while the player caught the ball, it was called totally reactionary and hence accidental offside. Now, I think you may recall an incident from the Lions tour that was had some similarities to that.
What did I say about it? This needs to be sorted out. Now, if they had Angus Gardner, by the way, good referee, had a fantastic game, and he's getting the big tick of approval by a lot of our New Zealand friends, don't you think?
I think he's doing great, guys.
So just on that, I think we've got to. I'm going to get. I don't know if all your Kiwis will like it, but I'm going to get Stu Dickinson to come back on the show. He's a fantastic guy in terms of knowing the laws. But we need to now take... There's been a couple of things too. And there's a good story on Rugby Pass about the scrum laws, the update to the scrum laws. So there's some silly things going on in the game when it comes to the laws. But this offside law is just out of control. But I think the referee determining if it's reactionary means that there can be gamesmanship there. Yeah. It means that if you're clever enough, I'm just going to go like that. Oh, I grabbed it accidentally.
Well,
so
this is the point,
let's take
so much interpretation.
Let's take the interpretation. Let's take the grey area out and make it more black and white.
All right.
I knew you had to bring that up.
Oh, I had to mention it.
But Angus Gardner is doing a good job.
He is. So that was 17-0, Crusaders over the Highlanders. Good night to the Highlanders for the season. Next game up, Brumbies 16, Hurricanes 35. Before we get into the game, the crowd, 9,771. Canberra Stadium, I don't know what it's called these days, still called Canberra Stadium.
I think it's GIO Stadium.
GIO Stadium, is it? I struggle to keep up with that sometimes. That is a very poor crowd. This is an Australian team in a final series.
That's a dreadful crowd.
I don't think they were up against any other rugby league games or anything, the Raiders playing, etc. So, and I think I saw a column by Justin Marshall who said, get rid of the Brumbies if you're going to get rid of the team. If they can't have a crowd turn up for a final, then get rid of them. And you know what? There's a little bit of merit in that. If you can't attract a crowd when your team's in the finals, that says a lot. But in this game, really good effort from the Brumbies compared to the way they've gone all year, right? The Canes got away at the end, but the Brumbies were in it, and I think the concern for the Canes heading over the Lions will be that in the forwards, the Brumbies were on top. Set piece, ruck and maul, rolling maul, Canes looked to struggle. Didn't look to struggle. They were struggling. The ball wasn't fantastic that TJ had to play with, and the Brumbies were in it for a long, long way. Had the lead at half-time before a few things, such as a beautiful bounce off a melon forward for Geordie Barrett to score a try, started to go the Hurricanes' way. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about that one because, you know, I found it very annoying that was a try. Like, you could actually play for that. You could have someone headbutt the ball at forward and chase after it.
That's the travesty, mate.
It is the travesty. But look, it didn't have an absolute impact on the game for me because clearly the Hurricanes were in the ascendancy then, and that was a result of the front football they had or the front forehead ball yet they had.
Yeah, I think there would have been a mild bit of panic from across the Tasman about the scoreline at half-time. But in the end, the class of the Hurricanes came through, and you just got the feeling that the Brumbies tried their best and they had a good go, but they were just holding on, you know, just holding on as the New Zealand franchises continue to overwhelm the opposition. Yeah. But I will say that, that it's going to be a tough road now for the Hurricanes moving ahead. They're still my team to ignite the final series, but it is a tough road now.
Yeah, it is. For a team like the Brumbies that hasn't had a great year, they haven't looked fantastic. They've defended reasonably well, but they haven't had a great year. For them to stay in that game, there was probably 3 or so points I thought that needed to go their way that didn't. One of which was right on half-time. The Canes had, I think they were a man down at the time, or maybe he'd just come back. They rolled down from their own half, couple of penalties, got to the try line, got held up. Not getting those points right on half-time really cost them. And I think in the second half there, that Falcon, but also I saw Warranui Hawera, the 5'8" for the Brumbies, missed a penalty kick for the line too that really cost them too. The Canes came back down. So those simple things that make a massive difference to a team keep coming out there. Just you have to be right on your game to beat some of these Kiwi teams, and they weren't there. Fardy had a big game. Such a disappointment to see him leaving Australian rugby. He's clearly our best number 6 in the game. He's not playing for the Wallabies. He's taking off overseas right now, I would expect. And the other player I wanted to mention, a lot of focus in Australian rugby on the halfback area. Phipps hasn't really grabbed it. You know, Genia came back and hasn't really grabbed it. Bit of talk about Joe Powell, who's been picked by Checker as one of his anointeds, you know, up-and-comers. I thought Powell looked pretty ordinary. You know, he's got a nice pass, but around the park, in terms of his option taking and his defence, I don't know if he's going to make it at international level.
Yeah, I think it's a real problem going forward with Michael Checker. And this goes to the whole development of players in those positions.
Yep.
Combinations too, we talk about that all the time. So if you haven't got the absolute best, of course we got Genia as well, but as I said, mate, I was doubtful about his form, and he certainly had a horrible year, well, not a great year for Australia when it came to the June internationals. So there's a lot of problems ahead, but the Brumbies doing okay, but in the end, I think, as many people said, justice prevailed for Super Rugby, because if they got through, man, we heard a fair bit about that.
2 more points out of the game for me. No surprises. I mentioned the points where the Brumbies lost it because they didn't quite get where they needed to get. Where it went right for the Hurricanes, 69th minute. Any surprise at all the impact Dane Coles had? And just the AB's fans, you must be absolutely shattered he wasn't available for the Lions team. He would have made a massive difference to the AB side. I called him as the best player in the world last year. I still think he's one of the best players in the world, and getting a good Rugby Championship season under his belt, I think he'll be a contender for best player in the world.
Well, should be the modern prototype.
Mate, 69th minute, step, dummy, pass, puts Perinara away down the side for the try. Great try, and just right there they put him away. Moved out to 28-16 and it was all over. Thanks to Dane Coles, he made that try.
Yeah, and it'd be great if some Australian forwards could do at least one of those things.
Yeah. And the other point I want to make is how great is it to see Christian Leilofano out on the field. He had wristbands there with his son's name on it, Jeremy Leilofano, and to see him back is fantastic on a personal note. Clearly for him and the team, a big moment, but also for Australian rugby, he's a great player. Great player.
Yeah, he certainly is. Christian Leilofano, who, if you go through my old rugby program Q&As for the Wallabies, I started them all with the pronunciation of the players. So he was one of them I had to nail, and he was just a terrific guy to talk to back then. And it's just a great story to see him come back, and that the rugby community worldwide celebrated, and TJ was wonderful after the game as well, wasn't he?
He was. Some really nice comments there from TJ.
Yeah.
It was,
Despite
was
the fact
great
you've
to
been
see.
giving it to him.
Hey, mate.
Hey?
When he opens his mouth, there's something nice. It's all good. It's when he starts flapping his lip.
But he was terrific. It was really well done, and that's what the game's all about. So, and it's great to see Christian back on the field and doing so well. It's just amazing story. Fantastic.
It is.
All right.
So, of course, that score there, 35-16. Good night, Brumbies for the year. Another team that was put to bed, but only just, much tighter than we thought. Lions 23, Sharks 21. Now, this game, I said, the Sharks and the Stormers hadn't been going too well. They looked pretty ordinary. They both might have run a bit dead the previous week because both of them turned up and had a crack. The Lions, Sharks, what a tense game. Now, I think, you can see in finals time, some teams start to tighten up. They don't play the game they want, and they start to, play a different type of footy. The Lions might be one of those teams who, it was interesting. It was so tight, and you could see them too tense. And in that, the first try, I think, for the Sharks by Cobus van Wyk was as a result of the Lions in their own half. This is 10 minutes in, 11 minutes in, and it was we want to play up tempo, but we haven't quite got our heads on right. It was a fast line out thrown in. The ball went out the backs, shambolic. They were intercepted twice. Threw a pass, intercepted, got it back. Threw a pass, intercepted. Over in the corner go the Sharks. The Lions just didn't keep it together, and they had to settle down, and they just scraped home. Yeah, and that's what we talked about. I said the other day about it's a different ball game when it's sudden death. Yep. And the conditions were fantastic for the game, and the Sharks came to play. Yep. I thought that that the way the game finished was quite epic, and probably in typical South African style, where you saw a kick go, was it 58 metres? Yeah. Something like that. So I think that's a good sign for the Lions, that they could close a game that is that tight and close it out. It'll give us some confidence, won't it? Heading into this week, they'll think, we've survived one, we've escaped it, we can actually now settle back into our game, you would think. Yeah, and they've had some big blowouts, because you do like the odd tighter game to set you up for the intense battle that is finals footy. But they got that battle in the first round of finals footy. So in the end, I think that they'll be better next week, and they'll be switched on. They'll know, okay, we can't chance our arm as much as we did during the season. We're not playing against the Sunwolves, though they'd like to. and I think, good for South African rugby. We talked about only the Lions being the ones leading there, but both the Stormers and the Sharks had some players on the weekend that went really well. How interesting too to see with the Sharks. When I think of drop goals in rugby, I think of two teams, England and South Africa, because they're the most famous teams for me in the past who have used it to effect. To see Bosch for the Sharks bring it out, scored a drop goal in about the 17th minute, had a couple of cracks later in the game and could have changed the game if he'd nailed them. Yep. It was a very, very interesting game. But of course, the big combering from his own half to knock that 78th minute penalty over for the Lions to hold on. Big result. Huge result. A couple of yellow cards in there too. Yeah. Franco Mostert got one of them, who's been playing particularly well. I haven't got a problem with yellow cards if they're brought out early to set the scene. There's no crap going to be taken. Yeah, actually, we didn't mention Sam Cane's one in the Canes game, but definitely deserved. Yep, absolutely. What else, mate? Last game of the round, or of the quarterfinals, Stormers 11, Chiefs 17. So the Chiefs travel all the way over. The Stormers sitting there nicely waiting for them. Probably not the best game of the weekend. Pretty tight. They left one of their blokes behind. They did too. He had a visa issue. It was someone filled out the wrong form. That's right. Massive mistake. Someone put the wrong number on there. And didn't let him in. Yeah. It was only 9-3 at half time. Damien McKenzie kicking particularly well to get the game there. Oh, sorry, this was the game with Canes. Yellow. I mentioned Canes before. I'm confusing Cane with the Canes. Sorry. Sam Cane in this game got his yellow card with the shoulder into the chin. And Jaco Pepper wasn't going to call it, but it did get called in the end. And Sam Cane went off to the bin. A bit harsher than the Liam Squire one in that, but came into a tackle with a second player, but still, under the current rules, very valid. So another tight game, went right down to the bell. 76th minute, Aaron Cruden, massive cutout, puts Stevenson over in the corner with his first touch of the ball. But really tight game, and neither team particularly comfortable. And Chiefs are a massive ask for them to now travel back and face the Crusaders at home.
Yeah, it is. It's going backwards and forwards, but you know, some teams can use it as adversity, and that might just, if you're the team with all the stuff happening for you, the easy travel, the easy results, then things might go your way. But you know, there were some really testing elements in all those games. You know, so I think, and don't forget, the Crusaders that's an energy sapping effort, playing in the wet and just rucking it up, holding the ball, sealing it off as much as, you know, you can say that you don't expend as much energy in defence, but you know you can take it out of you. The wet weather does, you sort of soak it up and it makes it a bit harder. So it's going to be, the shakedown for the second week of the final is going to be interesting. I'm actually not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, the thing about the Chiefs too is, you know, you'd have to say they're going to be long odds to travel back after this game in South Africa. They travelled out to South Africa. Now they've got to travel back. They've got to be long odds to take on the best team of the year at home in what looks like wet conditions. The only thing I'll say in their favour is you should have seen them celebrate at the finish. Like, of all the teams of the weekend who got up, they looked the happiest. They looked the most emotional. And that's potentially because this is a real farewell tour for these Chiefs teams. They've got the coach Rennie's on his way out, Aaron Cruden, Tawera Kurbalo, James Lowe, all leaving, all heading off. Yep. And, of course, Sione Lauaki was a big inspiration for them in the pre-season, who passed away, of course. So there'd be a very emotional Chiefs side. So, you know, maybe they'll find something against the Crusaders. You know, I don't like their chances, but you never know.
Oh, look, the Crusaders should win. They're favourites to win. But just don't rule out that character in the Chiefs. To go to South Africa and win and come back, if any teams can do it, the New Zealand teams can, or the South African teams, by the way, because they have got used to the travel. So it is tough. Yes, Crusaders should win, but do not rule out the Chiefs, who will be, as you say, riding on that passion of players moving out.
Yep. Another point on the Hurricanes coming across towards the Lions, though. In the last two trips to Joburg, the Canes have won 50-17 and 22-8. So the Canes can do it, and I'll be tipping the Canes, actually. I think the Canes will get the Lions, and the Canes will end up having to do what the Chiefs are doing this week, which is travel over and back and face the Crusaders. That's what I think will happen.
All right, let's see if it comes true, Nostradamus.
Well, mate.
All right, so that's the shakeout for Super Rugby. Now it's time to move on to... Now, this was going to be your issue of the week.
It was.
Strike issue of the week. The Wallabies training, running up little hills in eastern Sydney and using tape.
This is my checker watch for the week, I reckon.
Tape to cover up their mouths.
So if you didn't see the pictures...
Welcome to Checker Watch. What have you got?
If you didn't see the pictures, they're on Rugby.com.au, Fox Sports, everywhere. The Wallabies had a training session where they went running up and down hills and they taped their mouths shut. And it just looked weird. It just looked weird. I'd love to know, you know, personal trainers out there, someone tell us why that's going to increase their fitness, forcing them to breathe through their nose, I assume. I don't know what, but there was also apparently...
It's going to struggle if you've got a blocked nose.
Parts of the training session too were taping their eyes shut and letting their teammates lead them around or do certain things during the training session. But it just looked kind of weird, didn't you think?
Yeah, look, it does. And all these little scientific things become a bit ridiculous. So... I remember when the Wallabies wore sunglasses on the plane going to South Africa. This is to get them into the time zone. We used to take a sleeping tablet as soon as you got on there and woke up in the time zone. It wasn't too difficult back then, back in the day. I had a couple of cheeky reds on the way too, but I didn't have to play. Remember a couple of years back they had the
Breathe Easies.
Yeah, the Breathe Easies,
Yeah.
So that would open the nasal cavities up.
No, it did nothing.
Yeah.
It did nothing.
Apparently.
It was sold or something,
sold
but it did
as,
nothing.
yeah. I didn't do the science on it. But so this sort of brings me into the spin zone area, which I'm going to talk about a bit later. But it gives the Wallabies a bit of coverage. It makes it looks like they're working hard, running up hills, blah blah blah. They should be doing sand hills, by the way. That's a lot better for them in terms of improving everything physically. But you know, the big question is, and a lot of comments from the people who were making comments on Facebook and everything else, is where's the football? They should have had a football with them, and I absolutely agree.
Yes.
While you're running up that hill, fatigued, try and pass the footy.
Yeah.
Give them the football. It should be with them in the car boot, wherever they go.
Yeah.
If they get a coffee, the footy's with them at all times. And running up and down those hills, Benny, I would love to see them doing it. Maybe chip kicking and stuff like that.
No, I can't remember if it was Mackenzie's time as coach or prior to Mackenzie, but Digby Ioane, I think, when he first came on the scene, he had a bit leaden hands and he dropped it a few times, and they made him carry a footy around the whole time. That's it, mate. If we see you without a football, you're getting pinged.
But this in the old days, like I talked to Brian Milrose about it, and guys like Andrew Johns, one of the greatest football players you'll ever see in rugby league, always had the footy in the boot. He was kicking the ball and passing it all the time. And you know yourself, mate, when you see the footy, you want to pick it up and throw it around, have some fun with it, and it becomes an extension of your hand. So what's happened here is this separation with the Australian team. It's the gym, it's the theory, and the physical work with the pace. But that connectivity, that connection to the footy is remote. And that's the problem. Yeah, sure, work on your fitness. Like, this is ridiculous. And I know we had a question about the Wallabies not being fit even last year.
Yeah.
Whether this is a problem with Australian rugby, full stop. Yes, it is. You know, it's a huge problem because they're not working hard enough. And players might be whinging about the number of hours they're spending on it, and they should be told, no, keep going. Your job is to stay fit to play rugby. If we could all do that, we'd be in a great spot.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think all the messaging out of the Wallabies camp is consistent now. All the players have been quoted as saying, Hooper's saying it, Nick Phipps was out this week saying it, that they're not fit. So I find that really interesting, right? We're talking about it, all of a sudden everyone's on the same page. Clearly the word's gone out, spin doctor time maybe, but they've all been told, let's talk about our fitness, let's focus on our fitness. But the thing that I thought when I saw these taped up players, I thought, does Cheika just go for the gimmicks too often? You know, the golf club, or we're mongrel dogs, or,
yes.
The gimmicks.
The answer
I feel
is
like
yes.
It's rather than just let's be straight. I feel like there's got to be something he's got to hang on.
This is from a guy who remember when he prepared for the Waratahs season when they won 2014? It's 2014, wasn't it? It seems that long ago. Yeah. The fitness was a priority at the start of the year. He shook the team up. Not all the players were happy with him. Maybe he's become a bit too matey with them now, and now it's all about these strange sort of little bits and pieces to try and fire them up. Go back to the poster back in Melbourne. Remember that? The big barking dog stuff? I sort of know where that's sort of coming from, but in terms of where it's being thrown up from in management. But that sort of stuff shows you that if you have to push the players in this sort of really low-rank psychology, then you've got bigger problems than hoping to get a bit of tape to fix your breathing and whatever else to get you fitter. There are deeper problems in the psychology of the game in your country. Yeah. And I would just wish the psychology of the club game gets pushed up to the top level, because that's heaving at the moment.
But I'll tell you that the one thing about rugby, though, the Wallabies come out and win a couple and everything changes, right? It's always within your control as a team to turn things around very, very quickly. So let's see what they can do. And let's see who they do it with. I want to have a look at the Wallabies squad briefly now. A couple of very interesting calls in here. And what I find very, particularly confusing, I suppose, and maybe it's just me, but I went through the squad and I looked up and down at who was in it, and there's some obvious changes there. Quade Cooper, out. And even now that Carmichael Hunt, for those of you who don't know, Carmichael Hunt is injured. He's going to miss a few of the matches of the Rugby Championship, I think about 6 to 8 weeks. He's gone, and he was clearly someone that was important for Cheika. Now, he hasn't been replaced yet, but Quade Cooper, you would have thought maybe would get recalled. No, Quade Cooper has not been called. So Cooper is on the outers for sure. So these in and outs, though, Nick Phipps is back in, Jake Gordon is out. Nick Phipps has been injured, so clearly he's a favourite player of Cheika, even though he's been nowhere in the Waratahs. And really interestingly, still no Fardy, which I can still complain about because I can't believe he's not there and he's been let get away. But Kane Douglas and Rob Simmons are back in. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when he whittles this squad down. But he seems to be picking, around and about. I feel like some of it's on form and some of it's on what he's trying to rev players up, drop them, pull them in. Higginbotham went out. Higginbotham, who was starting 8, is not in the 38 now.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like he's not managing the players well.
It's almost like it's reverse recruitment gone mad, because he's looked at these players, then all of a sudden, oh no, he's no good,
Yeah.
But then later on he might come back to them, and he's done that a bit with, he's looked at Higginbotham, in and out, gone, and Fardy, I don't know.
He was in and out and
I
gone.
think players that look, I think Checker is a straight shooter. However, if you look at the character of these guys are straight shooters.
Yeah.
Fardy and Higginbotham don't tolerate fools and will say what they want to say. So is he reluctant to pick players who will rail against team policy?
Well, all right. Or maybe he just has trouble picking in his position. A coach picking the position they used to play.
All right.
Maybe there's a conspiracy theory for
Did he play halfback as well?
But you know, Checker was a 6 and 8, right?
Yeah.
At 6 and 8, and he seems to have
An
some
angry
trouble.
one too.
He was an angry 6 and 8, but he seems to have some trouble at 6 and 8 with finding his right balance there, and maybe he's looking for himself. What about that?
Yeah, well, we know Fardy's going, so that's a convenient excuse, but you probably want to still pick him just to keep him in the side and fire him up against the All Blacks. They need some fire there.
I don't know, but you'd have to think he wouldn't be going if he was the anointed starting number 6 for the last year, as I believe he should have been.
Yeah. If there's no avenue there, you may as well go and get the riches overseas.
Right.
And have a bit of fun.
Yeah. A couple of good things out of that Wallabies squad.
Can I just mention Quade Cooper?
Oh, yes, please.
Because I actually think he made the right call. I think Quade is nowhere near his best, and his best was in 2011. And I don't think Quade will doesn't give you the 100% focus that you need from the 10. And even when he comes on, when it's a bit loose, he can do okay. But he's just going to do the odd, weird thing and let the team down. And I just think it's a good move to not go with him. So I actually back him on that.
But let me ask you this. 38 players selected.
Yeah.
Is Quade Cooper the second best 5'8" in the country?
See, I don't think so anymore. No.
Who then? Doesn't spring to mind, does it?
Yeah, no. Well, I think Kurtley Beale is.
Oh, there you go. So a bloke coming back from England into Australia who's played intermittent 10 for Australia
He's just so talented.
You think he's the 10?
I know a lot of people are going to blow
Well, he's going to have to be.
Yeah.
But it seems strange to me to just bundle that bloke out.
Quade's ability to do game management all the way through, maybe because Queensland are going so badly this year, that has something to do with it. But I just look at him, and I look at him in the closing stages, and he just that interest in driving the game home isn't there. So I actually don't have a problem with him doing that. But you're right, he does need another solution. But in a way, maybe just picking Quade is a step backwards for them.
Yeah,
anyway.
Potentially. But I think if you're going to not pick him, you've got to have a plan.
But there is no plan. There might be a plan.
He's a better coach than me, mate, but I'd like to see what the plan is.
Is he?
Particularly, one of the things that we'll talk about in the next couple of weeks in the Wallabies is, as we see from a lot of our guys, and we've talked about in the past, is that 10-12 combo, the hiding of Bernard Foley in defence, and how they manage that defensive channel is going to be very, very important. And right now, it's not particularly clear. Some things I did like in the Wallabies squad, if I could just go to those.
Yeah.
Force players went from 4 to 11. So all of a sudden, Billy Meeks, Curtis Rona, a whole bunch of Force guys have come in.
Yeah, that's
and
great.
I think that's great. They've shown ticker, they've shown ability, and it's great to see them recognised. So that's really good. And the other good thing was, to upset our Kiwi viewers, Brad Thorne was there in Wallabies gear at Wallabies training, helping out. I say put his boots on and get him out there.
Why not? Why not?
Unfortunately, he couldn't, but
50 or something like that. But what a champion.
I reckon Checker would like him at 6 or 8.
He might be an option if we can flip the rules. So the Wallabies side, a lot of this is just rubbish spin, little stunts to keep us interested in the Wallabies heading into the Test series. And I think the proof is in the pudding. That's when they face up against the Springboks and the Wallabies in particular. The All Blacks in particular, and of course Argentina. They are going to give us a hard time. Australia doesn't match up well against Argentina. Every time Australia plays them, they have awkward wins or embarrassing losses.
Yep.
So it's going to be one hell of a tough rugby championship. There's a lot of talk here, and I think the Wallabies, because the players are out so early in Super Rugby, there's too much room for talk. And talk is what does the Wallabies, because they start believing all this rubbish that they spin heading into these Test series. And I think that's going to be probably part of their undoing, because they do believe their own hype.
Yeah.
And there's no justification for it, by the way.
I'm actually probably of the opinion that it's a good thing for the Aussie sides to be bundled out now, because I think they have to put such a poor super season behind them. And
if they have the right plan,
but Checker has to get the Wallabies in a Wallabies mindset and to put that part of the year behind them.
But where's
so
the
I'm not saying he's going to get it right.
Yeah.
I'm saying that I think the best chance they have is to spend some time together now.
But there's no evidence that he'll do that. Because look what's happened.
I'm not calling that they're going to make it. I'm just saying I think it's a better outcome for them to have that chance to do it.
Because I'd like to see what the game plan is.
Yeah, no.
Because we showed nothing in those June series. And I'll go back to what I said about the June series for the All Blacks and the Springboks. They actually used that to a positive impact, that they prepared their teams brilliantly for what's going to come in the Rugby Championship. Battle hardened, worked on their plays, increased their depth at test level, and I think they are so well prepared it's not funny.
Yeah.
All right?
Okay. Closing off with a couple of points before viewer comments.
Yeah.
Happy
I
with
reckon
that?
we could talk a lot longer about that, actually.
I reckon good. We have to do a second show, I reckon.
Because we need to go into depth about the responsibility of leading a national team, and it's more than just talking, turning up at events where you're handing out footballs and all that sort of stuff, running up down hills with tape on your mouth. It's a lot deeper than that, and we've been failures for too long, and I think we can go deep in that, and I reckon this spot right here is a good chance where we get someone else like Brady Papworth back in.
Yeah, we do. We need some guests back in, mate.
Yep. Right, okay, next.
Couple of points to close off on. I want to go back to Super Rugby briefly because, looking ahead of the Rugby Championship, a couple of stories written this week, one in the New Zealand Herald, I saw one in Fox Sports around the players of the year statistically. And one of the questions you've got to ask, particularly as the Chiefs come back to face the Crusaders, is what more does Damien McKenzie have to do to get picked in the All Black squad? Now, I know you're a fan. I quite like Geordie Barrett in front of him, but the stats are phenomenal for McKenzie.
Yeah.
He has just he best attacker metres by a good 300 metres, most carries by a good 25.
Yeah.
Defenders beaten, miles in front of everyone else. He's had an amazing, I'll bring it out, my favourite word, stonkingly good year. And
he's had a freakish year.
He's had a freakish year. And just I'll also throw to, I'll post this one under the videos. Fox Sports in Australia, they've got the lab, their stats guys. They named their team of the season, but they did it on stats. Van Rooyen from the Lions, Marks from the Lions, Alatoa from the Brumbies in the front row, Retallick, Chiefs, Mostert Lions in the second row, Khaleesi Stormers, Smith Reds, Amanaki Murphy from the Rebels in the back row, Perinara and Barrett in the halves, Lamapi at 12, Karevi at 13, Lowe from the Chiefs on one wing, Naholo from the Highlanders on the other, and McKenzie from the Chiefs in 15. I want an online chat about that with you guys because I think that's a great team, not a single Crusader, which just goes to show you stats will tell you one story, but not everything.
No, it certainly doesn't. There are players that I remember who on a Monday morning would go to the wall of the Waratahs and look at their personal stats, and they became statsmen, and they were obsessed by those. But did they actually help the team win? On many occasions they didn't, because they might have looked after themselves, but got to breakdowns but been isolated. Those sorts of things, they didn't really help the team. So stats can lie, and you can make them tell you whatever you want out of a game.
Yeah, well, I just saw Ada Ray say, and she's right, that the sabbatical for Ben Smith might see McKenzie sneak back in there.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. What else you got for us, Benny?
Mate, one more thing to mention before we do viewer comments. Yep. We had Moose in last week.
Yeah, Adrian
Skeggs from the Australian Rugby Business Network. He asked for a shout-out for his August 7 event. So just search for the Rugby Business Network on Facebook or the Australian Rugby Business Network, Google it. But he's got our mate Brendan Cannon, Dan Hunt, former St George Dragons Rugby League player, Tani Schultz, and hosted by Greg Mumm. They're doing a mental health awareness night through the Rugby Network. So you can get tickets to that online, so go and check it out. Shout out to Moose as well. Thank you for coming in last week.
Yeah, the great Moose. Good fella.
Plenty of comments again. I'll just run through them briefly.
All right,
I've got time.
So viewer comments of the week. Let's go.
Graham Fraser on YouTube. One of a few people starting to talk about, is there a reality to have a discussion in the future about an Australian-New Zealand competition when you look at the World Rugby calendar? Look, I don't think it'll happen, but I think, as I've said before, it makes economic sense and time zone sense. Don't think it'll happen.
Right.
JDV on YouTube also said focus on NZ and SA a bit more. I think that's last week. We just talked a bit about the Wallabies and the Waratahs to kick off.
Yeah, absolutely.
A Noble told us to stop fiddling with the iPads. Oh, mate, this is the way we run the show.
We're not actually. What's happening over here is Ben's got his notes. This is the stream. We have to monitor to make sure it works. And this one here actually runs the show. It's not going to go anywhere, so we're doing multiple shots, but we do pay attention to what we do here, and we're actually doing what 10 people do. So
that's right.
It's not.
It's a modern
easy.
miracle.
It's a modern miracle.
It's a technological miracle.
And we'll get slicker on that. So yep. What else?
Joshua H also on YouTube asked for another show. Asked for a Thursday show. He said we don't. And we've got more to say. We're going to try. We're going to see.
Just on that, yes. So we've got things happening. You know, we're talking to people with like Rugby Pass as well. Who are fantastic supporters of the program.
They are.
Really glad to have them on board, and we're looking to formalise something in the future. So, RuggaMatrix.
We would like to do it. Expanding
very soon, hopefully, and we could be out and about as well. So, you know, all those things to come. Yep.
On Facebook, Stephen Baxter, Rob Martin, Diatribes, keep them coming, Rob, and I know you're online right now.
Love your stuff, Rob.
Shifty Zim, really good point on booting Quade Cooper. And that was about it for the viewer comments of the week.
There was also a comment about, there was a question, who posed the question about the Wallabies laziness, or what was it about the Wallabies and the New Zealand coaches when I mentioned that they didn't get on. There was a question.
Psyche, it was a question about the Australian psyche. Last show, you said that some of the Kiwi coaches, Robbie Deans in particular, you talked to, struggled with the Australian psyche. And I think it was Ernest Amplis Ursus who asked for an explanation.
Oh, yeah, that's right. And the question was along the lines, is that an easy, convenient out after things go bad? So the quick question, I've covered this many times with our guests in the couple of hundred odd shows, but for newcomers, just quickly again, the Australian players generally aren't as active. They're a bit lazy when it comes to doing the work, I'll be frank, when it comes to players from South Africa and New Zealand who really love the hard work. If the coach is telling them to do something, they'll do it. But in Australia, you tend to get a bit of bite back, you know, and sometimes it's from the intellectual edge side of the player who doesn't want to do the extra work. So that often led to very smart players to make shortcuts. In Australia, we like shortcuts, and that's that personality trait that comes through in the teams. And that doesn't work well with a New Zealand coach who wants to work hard and will ride you hard, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're asking for an answer to that question, that's what it is. I have absolutely seen it in the back room, and it's been disappointing what I've seen. Hopefully players now are a bit more prepared to do the harder yards, but as you can see with the fitness levels of our players, there is something to it. So briefly, that's an answer to that question. We're not prepared to work as hard as the other nations to make sure we're fit enough to compete in those last 20 minutes. We know the All Blacks do it. We know they train like that. We know they do it as school kids on the way through. So that's the reason why. There's nothing wrong with the New Zealand coaches. It's a compatibility issue with the cultural aspects of our players, and that's a disappointing aspect from our end, not the other end. Cool. So that's it. Thanks, Benny. Anything else from you?
No, that's it, mate. All done.
All right, so just a quick one. Now, I said I'd do a backflip, just like a referee in the Lions series. And I had a couple of questions on Facebook and YouTube. I'm just going to pull up the names.
The Spin Doctor?
About the Spin Doctor segment. I was going to cut it out, but there's actually been a bit of demand for it.
Yeah.
And I know you were interested in it because, Ben, you were on one side of the fence and I was on the other. So I was trying to bend Benny around to my will, and you know. And
I was trying to cut to the chase and say what's actually going on.
No, we actually got on really well, and
it was respect though. Like you can always tell the guys you work with who you didn't bullshit, right? If you had the story, you had the story. You know, there was no lies. There was just not always the full truth because it didn't have to be, but. It was good. It was a good relationship.
And that's the thing, mate. It's not about you could never lie. And it was Mike Williams on YouTube. And it was Lewis Devon.
Lewis, good man, Lewis.
Who asked about this whole scenario. So I will introduce a spin zone or a spin cycle. Spin recycle might be a rugby term. We've got to work on the term. But I'll do a bit of nutting out and go through my old notes. I've got a lot of them from years gone by where I worked with the Wallabies and Waratahs. Covered them a lot as a Channel 7 journalist as well, an ABC reporter for a long time. And so we worked out all this spin doctoring techniques and also what's important heading into series. So I think I'll start with our series heading into the 2001 Lions series and what the battle plan was from Rod McQueen to me, and we had to enact. It was quite a fascinating series.
Looking forward to
Ben,
that.
you covered it.
Yeah.
You were with the England team though, weren't you?
The Lions series.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, with the Lions series. You were with the Lions?
Oh, no,
or were you following us?
Both.
Yeah,
all the way through. You're thinking of 03 when I spent with
03,
England.
yeah, England. Sorry, yeah. So with the Lions series, we'll get to that as well.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating one. But the Lions series in 01, we'll talk about that in depth next week and talk about what policies we enacted to try and make sure we got through the series. And we had factions all over the place going at us. And it was really fascinating.
That'd be
and
good.
I'll give you some insights. And Ben, you can give me your response from your side of the fence from back then. So thanks for joining us. We'll be doing the after show in a moment on Facebook. But I hope you enjoyed last weekend. Let's see if your pick gets up this weekend.
Questions, comments, likes, shares, subscribe. Please share our show out, guys. We love it when you do.
All right, there he is, Ben Kimber. And we'll see you next week, Benny.
Thanks, mate.
All right, mate. There he is. That is it for RuggaMatrix International. Hope you enjoyed the show. We will see you next week on the world's most quoted rugby podcast.